Ladies and gentlemen, please find your seats. Thank you.
I will remind.
All right. Welcome back, everybody. Please find your seats. Thank you. We hope you enjoyed a nice lunch and some networking opportunities outside on our nice patio. Thank you for coming back after lunch. So we're looking at the second half of the day of great speakers and panels and startup pitches. So be prepared for some really good talks on stage. Just as a quick reminder, we have the breakout training session in room San Francisco, which is called Innovating with Municipalities, and you're invited to join there anytime. Okay. I am super excited for the next speaker who's gonna come on stage to give her keynote. Fun fact about her, she's weirdly good at puzzles, so if you want to challenge her, go ahead. But also, she's a background in architecture, and she's a foresight analyst at Autodesk. And she's going to draw you a virtual picture of the prototypes of the cities of the future. Please welcome Radha Mistry.
All right. Hi, everyone. Please bear with me. I'm going to be attempting to multitask with a clicker and my notes, and this would have been a really great time to have like a robotic assistant, but we'll make do with what we have. So my name is Radha Mistry. I work for a company called Autodesk. I'm the foresight practice leader there. And the easiest way to kind of describe, see, there we go. Messed up already. All right, there we go. The easiest way that I would describe kind of my career trajectory has been that I used to make buildings, and now I feel like I spend a lot of my time building stories. And I've spent the better part of a decade practicing foresight with companies like Arup's Foresight Group, where we spent a lot of time thinking about the future of built environment. I also worked on Steelcase's research group, focusing on the future of work. And now at Autodesk, the scenarios that we construct as part of the strategic foresight practice there really helps us think critically about the future of designing and making, and what might that look like, not only for our customers, but what that means in the things that are actually being put out into the world. Now, if you're not already familiar with Autodesk, we make software for people who make things. So we help our customers to design and make everything from skyscrapers to smart cars. They use our tools to design, net energy buildings, net zero energy buildings, and cars, and even movies. And we've been in the automation business for over 35 years. Our technology has disrupted and changed many jobs. And we recognize that, automation is no doubt changing how we work. But more importantly, it's also starting to really change what we can work on and what we can make. So I wanted to share a little bit of our perspective on where we believe the future is headed and why we think that, and then show you how we're leveraging our foresight practice and a little bit of fiction to drive our thinking around how cities might be designed in the future. So what do we know about the future with any certainty? We know that by 2050, there's going to be about 10 billion people on the planet. We know that the middle class is growing really fast. We know that 400,000 people, that's about half of San Francisco, are joining the middle class today and every day into the future. And so with this growing population comes a growing demand. And that means that about 150 million more people every year are going to want all of the things that we expect, right? They're going to want abundant food. They're going to want perhaps motorized transportation. They're going to want things like mobile phones. So this idea of more is something that we believe is inevitable. But alongside this inevitable change is a very real circumstance of having to do all of this with less. So we have to reduce our negative impact on the planet, on our society, on workers, and it's a reality that we really need to face up to. And addressing this inevitability of having to do more, along with the reality of doing this with less, is something that we recognize as a massive design challenge. But the way that I like to spin it for my team is it's actually a really great opportunity that we've never really had before. And so my team, this is some of them at Burning Man, but my team alongside the Autodesk Research Organization is really tasked with creating stories of the future. And we believe that it's our job to help Autodesk and our customers make those stories come true. So how do we even begin to dream up what a better future looks like? Now, our work speculates on our customers' futures, amplifying global drivers of change and imagining stories of tomorrow so that we can more actively grapple with potential disruption in our core industries. And our core industries go across manufacturing, across architecture, engineering, and construction, and even media and entertainment. So it's a pretty wide span of things we're considering on a day-to-day basis. Now, to accomplish this, and this is Arthur C. Clarke, he's one of my favorite authors, but to accomplish this, the skill set that we often nurture overlaps with the skill set of science fiction authors. And this typically draws on signals from the real world in the social, technological, economic, environmental, and political kind of fields. And we allow these drivers of change to kind of fuel the imagination. So we take cues from science fiction in a sense and use it as a tool to gain perspective on the future. Now, the creative skill set of science fiction authors revolves around building imagined worlds by amplifying weak signals from the real world. And weak signals are fragmented indicators that give us insight into our potential futures and reveal something about the present. So it's even bits and pieces of what's happening in this building today. It's the beginnings of major trends. It's the small little ideas that haven't yet become fully adopted, but might actually become a major movement in the future. Now, last year, we undertook what we called a world-building exercise. And out of that exercise, 4 scenarios emerged, exploring how automation might shape the future landscape of our customers' jobs, our industries, and the nature of their work. The stories helped us to kind of quiet the noise in our present context and amplify those weak signals around the future of making that really mattered to us. Now, this exercise was really about exploring possible futures and leveraging strategic foresight practices to more deliberately bridge that space of uncertainty between the multiple horizons of our future and the singular horizon of our present. Now, the resulting scenarios helped us prototype potential futures and explore answers to questions such as, where do we see our place in the automation discourse? How can we serve our customers and our employees in the future? And will all of our workers even be human? Now, if you want to read the stories in greater detail, you can find them on Medium. They each covered different terrains, so a major city, a small town, an island before and during a hurricane, a remote hilltop village in the aftermath of an earthquake. But for the purpose of this talk today, I'm just going to delve into 2 of them and then show you how we're translating these into real-world outcomes. So this first one is looking at LA after the Olympics, and it's called A Metropolis in Transit. And it was really based on this fact that Los Angeles is gearing up for the 2028 Olympics. And it explored this idea of buildings and materials having a perpetual life cycle and not necessarily being beholden to one site or one use. Now, some of the questions that we asked ourselves in the development of this scenario were things like, how much complexity can be mediated by generative design? And now, for those of you who aren't as familiar with our generative design tool, it's something that we've been developing for a few years now. And it allows designers and makers the ability to explore an entire solution set of a design problem by only providing the program with your design constraints. So if I were to design a chair, I could say, or if I wanted to design a chair, I could say, I know that I want my chair to have 4 legs on the ground. I know that I want my chair to be able to carry 200 pounds of weight, and I know that I want my chair to have a back support. And I would put those constraints into the program effectively, and I'd be able to explore perhaps 10,000 different configurations that would meet those constraints. And so we're exploring this at various scales, not just the scale of furniture, and we're trying to really push how much complexity we can put into our generative design tool. And we're hoping that one day we don't just think about material constraints or load constraints, but we can actually think about what might people, citizens in a city need from their city, and how can we build that into the design tool. Now, another thing that we often do when we're coming up with these scenarios is we're not just kind of building them out of nowhere. We're looking for, very much in the same way that science fiction writers do, we're looking for signals from the real world, from society. So for this one, we looked a little bit to the past, we looked to the present, and we also kind of looked a little bit to the future. And we explored things like the London Olympics 2020 model, or 2012 model. And they were thinking about this idea of adaptive reuse. And now, while there might have been a lot of critique on what ended up happening in the outcomes of that, it was an interesting concept where the buildings that were meant to host athletes during the Olympics actually were then supposed to be used for low-income housing for citizens around East London. We also looked at this idea of if generative design could be used all over the world, would the tools still have to consider regional building codes? Now, so things like universal building code, this idea of the convergence of manufacturing and construction, and just thinking about the fact that oftentimes the Olympics don't really do well for the cities that host them, were all things we were taking into consideration. And then we were looking at, it's not just about what is being designed and made, but what new roles actually need to exist for these cities to come apart. So when you're starting to think about smart cities, new roles will have to come about for those smart cities to actually emerge. And so we looked at things like, what about a neighborhood data advocate whose entire role is really about working with the community, with local government, in this case with the Olympics, to inform development and essentially decode the data for citizens. And then this idea of a dynamic resourcing supervisor. Now, automation has meant that this supervisor isn't just overseeing one construction site, but a number of sites that are sensed and connected within a construction ecosystem. And so they're working on a platform rather than a portfolio of products. And this has allowed them to safely and efficiently distribute materials, equipment, and labor across multiple sites. And what that means in the long run is you have less waste, you have greater efficiency, and you're probably able to deliver your projects to a greater level of just on time. So the major premise of this was the Olympics have really left a poor legacy with most cities. So how might generative design help to mediate the short-term needs of the city in preparation for the Olympics and reconcile the long-term needs of citizens? And this tension is something that we were really interested in as we were developing this scenario out. So the Olympic design and construction team put generative design tools to the test, not only to integrate business metrics, but also to factor in things like resource constraints, water shortages, compressed construction timelines, an adaptive reuse approach to programming where existing infrastructure could be repurposed for Olympic events and new builds could be deconstructed easily. So their raw materials could be redistributed for other projects. So imagine designing a building knowing you're gonna take it down. What would that start to look like? And now the second one, we often talk about smart cities and we think about these large, highly dense urban areas. But what that does is it often leaves behind smaller towns. And these people still contribute to our society and our economies. They contribute greatly to our manufacturing ecosystem. And so smart cities are only as strong as their networks and their data. So how could we make space for cities on the periphery of major metropolitan centers? And so some of the things that we were considering here was how does the nature of manufacturing change when applied within a network of microfactories? Or how might the application of manufacturing processes address high levels of complexity and low levels of predictability often found on construction sites? And so we were also thinking here about human and machine collaboration, taking robots off the factory floor and onto the construction site. What would that look like? What would that mean? What kinds of new roles would have to exist to really leverage that? And some of the things we were looking at here, again, were this idea of the rigidity of manufacturing factories making them obsolete, or the One Belt, One Road initiative, which really was talking about an economic zone that really pushes beyond geographic boundaries, or the notion of a configurable microfactory. So what if a factory isn't necessarily just supposed to do one thing or one set of products, but what if you could upload a tool set to that factory and it could change based on the needs and expectations of the local economy or a new project? So the new roles that emerged in this scenario were something such as the cobot site manager, overseeing robot and human teams on the factory floor, translates pretty well to robot and human teams on construction sites. And one of the things we considered here was we talk a lot about the shininess of using robots on construction sites, and oftentimes we forget that there's this piece that we're missing, which is this trust piece. And so for us, we said, well, they're still going to need supervisors on these teams. We're still going to need to spend some time to build up that relationship between humans and machines. We can't just go straight off and say, all right, robots, do the job, build this thing. And so here, we're thinking about this transition period in the next 10 years. And we see that there's space for people who have been historically working in factories to actually bring their skills onto construction sites and apply their skills in new contexts. Another role was a creative roboticist. So these folks were brought in to run simulations using augmented reality and virtual reality to gather knowledge from workers and then leverage those insights, coding them into machine learning algorithms. And this was ultimately to train robots to work better in partnership with humans. And then finally, a nomadic systems architect. So this person would be mediating the construction and rehabilitation environment, assessing how to best proceed with optimal technology solutions and very real resource constraints on the ground, and liaise between designers and builders who, in these smaller towns, could often be local residents who might not have the access to the most emerging tools or skills. So how could we use AR to supplement some of those skills and teach new skills to existing workers? And so the premise here was, as other industries continue to move away from models that required the ownership of products and towards the usership of services, why not leverage a manufacturing as a service model? Corporations wouldn't have to commit to a single site or town, and for a fee, they would have access to what we dubbed here the Rust Road network. And as demand for particular products shifted, so could the nature of the manufacturing process. Now, the stories or the scenarios really allow us to prototype our ideas in a safe space. And they do what I call kind of quieting the noise. And allows us to transport ourselves not just to other worlds, but to other futures. But if these fictions help us with map making, the true work of strategic foresight is to figure out, what do we actually do about it? How does this actually bring value to our business? It helps us to deal with the uncertainty and capitalize on change to really amplify our imaginations in service of true innovation. And so these foresight vectors inside of Autodesk take the form of how might we questions. And they help us to connect our ideas for the future needs of our customers with the efforts of our company today. So I wanted to share a couple of these projects with you, as there are things we're exploring beyond our labs in the design and manufacturing of buildings, of infrastructure, of cars, and ultimately cities. So the technologies we're developing around manufacturing are opening up an interesting space around how things are designed and made and how these two practices are really converging. And so we've been exploring this idea of convergence with NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab on this concept for a Lunar Lander. And this is part of our efforts to really reimagine what manufacturing might look like in the future. Now, one of the biggest constraints of this lander is that it has to travel 365 million miles, So lightweighting it was a really, really big deal for this project. But its manufacturability was also a really big deal. And so what JPL really cared about for this project was exploring whole new ways of making things. Now we know that the world is not going to retool around additive, so we're exploring a different path with JPL. One that leads to dozens of manufacturing options that JPL already have access to and that are optimized for materials qualified for space travel today. So all from a single problem definition, which produces a variety of potential design solutions, each optimized for different manufacturing methods. So for example, the lander's legs are optimized to be milled. We've worked with them to develop new algorithms that encompass both 3 and 5 axis milling. And now we're working with them on how to 3D print molds for designs that are optimized for casting. Our work helping JPL focuses on converging how they design and make, and that means that they avoid spending valuable cycles pursuing non-manufacturable design options. So they're only working within the constraints of things that can actually be produced on site in their labs. So instead, their engineers are actually able to pursue designs that they know are ready to make. Now, if JPL can use generative design to design all types of parts and make them in all types of ways, can you imagine how this might benefit other manufactured parts and products? Now, our explorations with JPL are helping us demonstrate what a better future might look like in manufacturing, but we're also really interested in figuring out what does that mean for construction. And we're incredibly focused on exploring how to demonstrate a better social, economic, and environmental future to our customers, because we do believe that you can hit those 3 things. So we're working with a company called Van Wijnen, and they're a family construction business in the Netherlands, and they build a lot of property, which includes affordable net zero energy housing. Now, building housing that's both affordable and sustainable might sound a little bit contradictory, but not to Van Wijnen. And they're not like most construction companies. But like most construction companies, after the last downturn, they kind of realized that that 2% profit margin that they were chasing just wasn't sustainable. And so they decided that they needed to do something else. And so they really looked beyond their profession and started looking actually at car manufacturers, at airplane manufacturers, and at software to see how those companies were running their businesses. And that's how we actually ended up started talking to them. And they told us that they're starting to think of their construction and development company more like an automotive manufacturer, where they developed a modular concept for housing that could be used in many different configurations. And they prefabricated each component themselves, first all off-site at their own factory, and then on-site at any job site. So they'd reimagined the way they approached building houses, but now they were wanting to think about how they could reimagine the entire design process of those houses. And so we helped them using generative design technology on a project to explore 15,000 different design options. And they ended up focusing on the 3 most interesting choices that they could shape into what they had defined as the perfect urban neighborhood. Now, generative design helped them look across multiple dimensions all at once. So they were able to maximize the amount of solar energy that they could collect. Generative design gave them the ability to meet their net zero energy needs. And not only this, it also helped to optimize for things like backyard size and views, ensuring that the housing met the human needs of its occupants as well. And that's not all that Van Wijnen was able to optimize for in this example. Cost and profit were also part of the model. Van Wijnen's running a business. We had to make sure that this was sustainable for the business also. So our work together is helping Van Wynen reconcile the affordable and the livable, the sustainable with the profitable. And we figured if Van Wynen can use generative design to do this for their housing business, can you imagine what it could do for their bigger projects, for entire neighborhoods, for the scale of the city? Now the last one, we realize all of our customers are seeing their work change because of automation. And it's true, as I said before, that our technology has disrupted and changed many jobs. So we're thinking about how we might foster a collaborative relationship between humans and machines. Now, in the decades that robots have been around, their physical capability hasn't changed much, and neither has their environment. Robots are generally found locked up in the same old work cells. We do this to protect ourselves, and we do this to protect our investments. And the investment in industrial robots has helped streamline manufacturing. That Six Sigma thinking of the 80s made manufacturing as lean, as efficient as possible. But with our processes locked down and essentially our robots locked up, it kind of left something to be desired. So we're reimagining how we can work with robots in entirely new ways. Not just on the factory floor or the movie set, but on construction sites as well. So I'd like to introduce you guys to our robot. Her name is Ashe. Ashe is no different than other robots, except for the fact that we don't give her any repetitive work to do. So we're exploring actually how we can give Ashe more freedom. Freedom to 3D print in metal all on her own. Ashe doesn't rely on us for direction. Instead, she works as part of a closed-looped system to self-correct as she prints. We've also been working with a team called MX3D to see just how far robots can take us. And they've helped us push the envelope a little bit further. So we've been working with MX3D to robotically print this bridge. And it looks easy, but it's not, because with 3D printing, you can't print in steel in the same way that you might print with a plastic or some other polymer. So simply applying one layer after another doesn't always work. If the robot welds on top of a layer that's already been applied and hasn't completely cooled, that weld is essentially weakened. So to get better welds, the robots at MX3D have sensors that track how hot every bit of metal printed is. And a machine learning algorithm helps the robot learn how to adapt its welding strategy on the fly. But MX3D have a broader vision for how sensors can help them build better bridges. See, 3D printing in metal at an architectural scale using robots is a kind of out there thing, but what that means is there's really no engineering data about how things like this perform. So that's where the sensors come in again. MX3D are instrumenting this bridge and using this data to drive a digital twin that reflects the state of the real bridge in real time. Now, this allows MX3D to build up knowledge about this bridge and how it performs over time. Now, imagine how that might help us future-proof our infrastructure. And if we had more instrumented bridges, we'd be able to build up a better, more generalized knowledge of bridges and how they all perform. So imagine what we could learn from that, how that might change what we build next time. Now, automation can help us explore bigger spaces. Our robots can help us expand our idea, not just of what we can make, but how we make things, really in collaboration. And by using machine learning to teach our robots, we can learn from them. And we're finding that our relationship, the way we work with robots and our automated tools, is becoming much more fluid. Now, the scenarios that emerged from our world-building exercises serve less as prediction and more as provocation. They can help us to quiet the noise and amplify the weak signals from real-world events that really matter to us. It forces us to recognize that sometimes imagination can help us understand whether we're even asking the right questions to truly innovate. If we can do this, we can help ourselves, we can help our customers, and we can bridge that space of uncertainty between our offerings today and our opportunities for tomorrow. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Radha, for a wonderful keynote. Let's give her another warm round of applause, please. Well, some of you might be wondering, who am I? Many of you might be wondering, why am I here again at another Plug and Play event? Well, bear with me. I love events, and I love educational and futuristic and interesting events like this. And what I love even more is that all of you guys are here. Thanks for being with us, and thanks for hanging out today. Give yourselves a nice warm round of applause, please. But no, by all means, by way of introduction, I work on the ventures team here at Plug and Play, and I would love to take over for the rest of the day. We will have a very nice content piece, a panel rather, around the future of urban cities and urban life. So while we get the seating rearranged, maybe I can welcome the first panelist today. That is going to be John Walton. John brings over 25 years of experience in the field of information technology and has a very diverse background in both public and private sectors. Currently, he's the CIO for the County of San Mateo, and he manages a team of highly professional and very skilled group of people to deliver a variety of services, including, and correct me if I'm wrong, public safety radios, data center infrastructure, county-wide enterprise applications, strategic planning, open data, and much, much more. So please, well, he's already here on the stage. Let's give him a warm round of applause. Then we will have Andrew Collins joining the stage as well. He formerly was Smart City Lead at the Greater London Authority, but right now he works as the head of data of Smart Dubai. Primarily, he's focusing on data governance and policy development, creation of data science center for excellence for city service development and policy making. So please welcome him with a warm round of applause. And then we also have Tony Batala, who is the CTO and head of innovation for the city of San Leandro. Since his appointment in February of 2014, what he has done is pretty incredible. He has helped launching a 10 gigabit internet connection at City Hall, public Wi-Fi, and public-private partnerships for residential broadband services, utilizing the fiber optics network that the city already had. He oversees all aspects of IT, starting with infrastructure and service delivery in general, ending with consulting the city about the potential policies and technology in general. So please, a round of applause for Tony. And then these fine gentlemen, and the whole conversation is going to be moderated by none other than Dr. Jonathan Reichenthal. He's the CEO of Human Future, a global business and technology, education, advisory, and investment firm. He's the former CIO of the city of Palo Alto and a multiple award-winning technology leader. In 2017, he was named one of the top 100 CIOs of the world. In 2016, he was named one of the top 20 most influential CIOs in the United States. So I think we have a pretty cool gang here on stage right now. So please, one more round of applause for everyone here right now. So gentlemen, thank you for joining us here today. As mentioned, I'm Yanis. I hope this is going to be as insightful and a great food for thought for everyone as the rest of the day today. And I guess you can take it from here.
Good stuff. Thank you so much. That was quite the introduction. Thank you for that. Thanks to Jennifer for inviting us to this awesome event. There you are. And Plug and Play, the first of many. You know, I did a small smart city event here about 5 years ago, and there was just a small group of people. So this movement is really building. It's really impressive to see what's happening. I couldn't be happier with the group I have here. Some of them are my partners in crime, and it's great to have Andrew here as well from Dubai, and formerly prior to that from London. So we've got some great people. We'll jump in, and I think we're gonna share mics to make this happen. Let me just start. We had some intros, so we know who you are, but I'm interested in why you do what you do. So maybe Tony, you'll start us off.
All right. Well, thanks, Jonathan. Why do I do what I don't know what I do first and foremost. I think a lot of it I'm compelled to do. No, I mean it. I talk about my work style sometimes, and when we're onboarding new people in my group, I tell them, I'm a little chaotic. At least it might appear that way. And I think I can't help but be that. So
You have to do it.
Yeah, no, I have a very kind of, squiggly ideas of how I want to get to where I'm going to get. It's not a linear line. And so I think the easiest answer as to why I do what I do. First and foremost, I do believe in the mission of the public sector to deliver value for their community, for their constituents, for the people who live there. So I do believe in that. I do have a private sector background, so I do come with think a little differently on how we approach problems. But I just come at them the way I feel I'm compelled to.
Great. We all have mics now.
Oh,
So
great.
Andrew, how did you escape from GITEX? They let you out?
Yeah, GITEX, for those people who don't know, it is a 5-day exhibition in Dubai where you spend a lot of time on your feet explaining what you do. And so I'm really glad to be here in California. I really like this sort of more relaxed setting. But why do I do what I do? I think it's a question of curiosity, really. And just being really sort of invigorated by cities and the intersection of technology and data and what you can achieve with that. I mean, I think it's really interesting thinking about the sort of skill sets that come together in smart cities. I don't know whether I like smart cities as a term, I have to be honest. But I mean, my background is in French and German studies, so Lord alone knows how I come to be in amongst people who probably come from a far more technical background, but I'll happily explain a bit more about that later, perhaps.
Oh, very, very good. By the way, I think we're stuck with the term smart cities, for better or for worse. How about you, John?
Well, first, I'm just going to put it out there. I think it should be smart regions. I think smart cities is too constraining. So I've been trying to push this idea for a while that I think if you look at what defines a city per se, you're leaving out a big part of the land mass and population we should be thinking about, which really leads me to why I do what I do. I think for me personally and for a lot of people I work with, I don't know Andrew as well as I know Tony, but I like to think we do what we do in government, and I like to think you're here and doing what you're doing, innovating and coming up with new ideas, because we're trying to make society a better place and be more happy and be more prosperous and productive, that are educated, healthier. I'd like to think really that's at the root of everything we do. We try to invent things, we try to earn money, but really, to me, the root of all that is because we're all trying to make our lives better, and by a function of that, make the societies we live in better, the neighborhoods better, our towns, our cities better. And I really think for me, that's the underlying premise. And that's why I work in government. For me, government is the place where I can make the biggest impact. I can have the biggest difference, make the biggest impact on how to make the neighborhoods and society I live in better. So that's why I do what I do. I do a lot of other things. But for my job, that's what I do. Race cars. And I do that because I love it too. I mean, an autonomous Tesla could probably beat me around the track. But I race cars because I like driving cars. And so I would love to have an autonomous car take me to work, but I don't want it to drive me around the track.
Right. Super. It's lovely, dear. I think we all come from a place of doing this for the right reasons, with passion, and it's what gets us up every day. I think that's really important. Let's start with you, John. I wanted to know your thoughts on the definition of urban innovation from your perspective and how it relates to smart cities.
Actually, I'm going to toss that one back to Tony, because as Tony would tell you, I grew up on a dirt road in the country, and I only work in a city. I actually think Tony's a better one for that question, because I would look to Tony as probably knowing the definition of urban innovation. I mean, if you look at my county, I'm 550 square miles. I have 18 cities, but 80% of my land mass is rural. So I'm gonna hold my thoughts for more the rural side of the panel. I'm gonna throw it back to Tony and put him on the spot about San Leandro and urban innovation.
Well, I might disappoint you, John.
It wouldn't be the first time, John.
I know that's part of my role is to disappoint. Continually disappoint. That's a thing I'm making
You're
up.
consistent, that's all I ask.
But I think, well, so on the smart cities, I'm going to throw my hat in the ring here and say smart cities are stupid, only because it's a vision that cities haven't fully embraced. You are all trying to work with cities and partner with cities. You're developing great products for cities. You're thinking like cities, or at least trying to, which is good. It's the right direction. But there's a disconnect, right? There's an adoption disconnect. Cities aren't adopting smart city technology maybe at the rate that 5 years ago you would have expected. And I think part of that is coming down to the vision of smart cities, which is very tech-heavy and very developed by the tech sector, and then fed back into cities as their own vision. This is your vision, and I have the solutions for you. And I think there's a disconnect there. So when I say smart cities are stupid, what I mean is that I'm a believer of cities creating their own definition of what it means to be a smart city, defining it for themselves. So you tell me what it means for you to be a smart city. I'm not going to tell you about what a smart city is and then benchmark you against that and say, well, you're stupid. You're not a smart city. You don't have all the whiz-bang that I do. I think that's not the best approach to get massive wide adoption of smart city technology, which is something we all want. So again, as I said, I will disappoint you, John. I'm sorry. But I think the short answer is cities need to figure it out for themselves. The long answer is it's better to do it in a way that it's truly at meeting them where they are, rather than trying to pull them up to some abstract vision that they can't wrap their heads around.
Nice. Okay, good. I'm going to ask Andrew, because Smart Dubai has a pretty clear vision of what they mean by smart city. And perhaps what would be interesting, given your incredible experience, is maybe just a type of comparison with London or a contrast. That'd be kind of neat to understand that.
Yeah, I don't think you were here this morning, Jonathan, when Jeff from World Economic Forum, his first slide was a picture of Dubai, the dramatic cityscape with all of the skyscrapers, with all the blazing lights on, and the 7-lane highways. And I don't want people to think that that is Dubai, the smart city, at all. I mean, it's a city of dramatic growth, and it's 48 years old and has tremendous ambition around it, but frankly, it's probably at a stage in its own history where it's in a slightly existential moment. It needs to move out of a real estate economy and be something deeper and more varied than that. But its vision of a smart city is all about outcomes, which I think is really important. And the primary one of those, amongst those, is happiness. And that's not meant to be a sort of twee, superficial thing. It's actually grounded in some pretty serious thinking about what promotes customer happiness, citizen happiness, strong communities, the sort of seamless experiences that you would expect in a city, and that the sorts of technologies that people have been talking about today can create. I mean, how's that different from London? I mean, I suppose there I sort of move into the question that you asked of John and Tony about the difference between urban innovation and smart cities. And urban innovation to me is something that's sort of, it's not quite done at the scale of a smart city, which I think, as John was alluding to, you know, you have plenty of big tech and sort of digitized infrastructure that can sound tremendously exciting, but it's actually tremendously difficult to deliver at scale. You don't just sort of plonk that down on the top of a city and it's there. A lot of the work that we did in London was in fact a little bit like a patchwork quilt. It was much smaller in scale. It was much more sort of focused around, I suppose, human-centered design and bringing together sorts of multidisciplinary teams to do things that, quite frankly, might not have had much technology at their heart. There's probably some technology there or thereabouts, but it could be something as simple as a sort of pop-up park. That's urban innovation. That's doing things differently. It could be financing things in different ways. I think the one sort of comparison that I draw between the two, both Smart Dubai and London, is the importance of data, or the potential importance of data, as well as an area into which cities should move if they are to be, properly smart or hotbeds for urban innovation.
Nice, nice to bring that richness of experience to the table. And I love that you raised the happiness point. I go to Dubai quite often, and this is a real thing. It can sound a little, I guess, hokey here.
It can.
But there's real clout.
I'm a cynical Brit. It sounds a little hokey to me as well.
But you talk so highly of it, which is a testament. I mean, I think there's a very important debate right now about whether GDP measures the success of a place. I think some could conclude it doesn't, and perhaps happiness is a much better metric for that. Now I'm going to turn it over back to John again. Now I hope you can answer this question because they're all about urban innovation, What's a success story in your smart rural region?
Yeah, I didn't mean to throw it back at Tony. Let me just let me apologize. For you all in the audience that don't know, Tony and I work very closely together, so I tend to give him a hard time in public, which isn't very kind to me, because Tony's really one of the people I admire the most. And if you want to know what urban innovation is, I just want to put a little plug in. He does work at the national level with NIST and NTIA, publishing blueprints about how other cities and other counties should take what he's done and others have done and replicate that across the U.S. So he's very humble about the things he does. But I would say he's a person we really look up to in public sector around this. And so that's kind of why I threw that one back to him, just because I think he really does speak to a sort of national audience about that. But I will pick up on a success.
Please.
But I want to bounce that against a failure, right? Because I think in government, you asked me a question once, is failure an option? I think failure is just natural. I just think we're embarrassed to talk about it in government a lot because it feels like it's not an option. So I'll give everybody a little history lesson real quick. Once upon a time, I was deputy CIO in San Jose, and there was a company called Metrocom, which was trying to sell these ricochet modems to all these big cities around the U.S. I'm suspecting some of you weren't born then, so I'm not going to actually say the year. But, that was the early days. That was like a 56K modem that you would, like a brick, kind of like the early cell phones you put on your laptop. They got up to 256 at one point. Everybody was excited. But that was early days of smart cities. I mean, we were trying. That was before the telcos. It was still 1X. We were really trying to innovate. But that was an abject failure. I mean, they came at it from the standpoint of, you should do this for your population, but it was sort of a field of dreams because the population didn't have iPhones then, which was really the driving force behind a lot of this. The techies wanted it, the rest of the population didn't want it. We couldn't come to agreement on a shared vision, so they were trying to make money, we were trying to earn revenue off of our light poles, so the whole thing fell apart. So when I hear about the 5G conversation, I feel like I'm sort of in the Wayback Machine sometimes, talking about the Metrocom modem contracts again. But I'm hopeful this time we learn from the past and we won't repeat that mistake on 5G. So to me, that was a failure because I just think the two sides, like the whole triangle, the public and government and private sector, just didn't have an aligned vision on what we were trying to achieve and where we're trying to go. So I'll give you an emerging success, I hope. It isn't a success yet, so I can't, come here and say this was a great project. But in our county, one of the things we care about is happiness, is health, right? The health of the public and the health of society in general. And air quality, believe it or not, in my county, even though it's rural, it does have an urban area. And the air quality in our county is of a very big concern to us. People remember it being very good, and now because of congestion and traffic, and occasionally we have wildfires up in the North Bay, and the smoke plume comes downstream, and we're shocked when our air quality gets bad. People have a lot more sensitivity around that now. And so we're doing IoT smart region, because it's not limited to one city. Oh. We have a lot of cities, and in our county, there was one air quality sensor in the entire county in Redwood City. And so when there was a purple air day, meaning a bad air day, you just assumed, well, it was bad air in Redwood City, so it must be bad everywhere. So we were closing schools. People were afraid for their kids who had asthma and things like that. And so we really took that on with the public. We said, okay, how do we engage with the mobility companies like Tesla and other auto manufacturers that have air quality sensors built into their vehicles? How do we get low-cost consumer-level devices and start tapping into public giving us data from their micro areas? So we're doing a big analytics project with Google now, And we're trying to map that out. We're trying to do air quality at the micro scale in our county, and also use predictive analysis to say not just what air quality has been in the past or what it is right now, but what's it going to be an hour from now? What's it going to be 4 hours from now? So that people can plan their lives and travel and work and school around not just what they know at this moment, but what we think it's going to be like a weather forecast in the future. So to me, that's a real benefit. And I will invest time and money and partner with people all day long to do things like that that have a direct benefit to the public.
Yeah, awesome example. And it's an interesting one, too, because we want to measure the quality of air. We want to know about it. But when we find out about it, we've got to do something about it.
Yeah.
Right? And so there's a lot of stakeholders who maybe get nervous about that. And perhaps rightly so, too. Andrew.
Can I, because the air quality point's a really interesting one for me, and if we're talking about sort of success stories, it's one of the most interesting projects I did in London. So for your one air quality monitor, we'd got 30 Rolls-Royce air quality monitoring stations, and I call them Rolls-Royces very deliberately because they cost a lot of money. They sat by the side of roads, and that to me was a really important thing because you automatically assume that air quality or pollution is something that automobiles generate, but it's a much wider issue than that. In a city like London, there's still a lot of industry, and it still creates a lot of pollution. There's a lot of housing that has pretty inefficient heating systems in it that, you know, if the right sorts of policies are applied to them and the right interventions are made, you start to bring pollution down. So it's pretty much exactly the same example whereby you understand you've got these 30 Rolls-Royces parked a long way apart in a massive landmass called London. So it's then how you fill in the gaps between those with other forms of air quality monitoring sensors. And yeah, there were the back garden scientists. We had a bunch of people strapping air quality sensors to pigeons and throwing them off rooftops. And all of that needs to be, all of those measurements need to be calibrated and brought together through a machine learning model that we developed with Alan Turing Institute. So a great example of how we brought together academia with city government to address a policy problem using data.
And I think you bring up a good point. I'm sorry, Jonathan. I think, and you touched on it, Jonathan, but I think you just gave the perfect example. We do things around smart cities, to me, to initially measure or maybe slightly improve. But really, to me, the best projects, the ones I'm the most excited about, is where we engage the community at a lot of different levels. I think that community engagement around air quality or transportation, that problem solving, sure, you have to collect data. And it's always great to have some cool tech that might be part of the solution. But really the thing to me that is the most interesting and intriguing and exciting is when the population gets engaged. When a lot of people, the backyard scientists and the concerned parents or the small business owners get engaged and aren't just seeing the data and using the data, but they want to be part of finding the solution to the problem. And to me, that makes the long-term success.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Tony.
You want me to pile on here, Jonathan?
You had something you wanted to share?
Just don't make it air quality.
No. First of all, John, thank you for the kind words. I'll Venmo you. Do you have Venmo? It's an app all the kids have. I would call John.
He wants something from you. You're going to find out what that is in a couple of days.
I would call John well, for make those kind words, I had to bribe him to say that. I would call John a mentor, but I don't like to make him feel old. So. But he's, no, I do look at John as a thought leader in cities and in government and definitely have learned a lot from our partnership and working together. So you mentioned air quality and how when air quality comes up, and you said don't mention it, but now I am, how you have to do something. And so you can think of that like a tension, right, in government. As governments are all about tensions, and some of the earlier panelists talked about tensions. And that's actually a really interesting thing in government is you always are trying to find a balance. There's always two different sides to the issue. And you've got to strike some kind of balance that mediates the problem somehow and achieves some resolution that there's some sort of gain and progress moved forward. Well, you can look at the organization itself and apply that same kind of thinking. And so when you ask me, what does urban innovation mean? Yes, there's the innovation that's happening in the community and transportation and broadband and air quality and sensors and IoT and everything else. A lot of that is driven by the private sector. That's you doing that innovation in companies that are developing these new solutions and coming up with ideas, and then trying to embed them back into cities through partnerships and procurement and things like that. But there's the organization, our city itself. And we need to think about how we can develop a capacity to be innovative. And when you're in government, you're not really developing products, right? We don't really develop products. You develop products, and we buy them. It takes us a year or two. We deliver services. And so what we think about in innovation in a city organization is service innovation. So how can we be better at the services that we deliver? And now remember, I was talking about tensions. Well, you got to look at the tensions within the organization. So we're designed to be risk averse. We have to have all these things in place because we can't waste taxpayer money on things. So we need to have all these checks and balances on how we buy. That's why it's so hard to buy from us. There's a reason why. But at the same time, we need to be innovative. So we have a tension there, and we need to think about how we can balance and mediate that tension. And one of the ways, though, is for us to figure out internally, how do we build a capacity for a city to be innovative? And if you don't do that, you're really not going to get to the point where you're doing all this cool stuff out in the public because your organization doesn't have the capacity to even do it. So it's kind of like a building block.
Nice. I like it. I like it. So we're going to get to the practical part of the little discussion now. The audience is full of entrepreneurs and people who want to sell into government, folks who want to make a difference. So I want to spend the short remaining time we have talking about advice. Because I was thinking about this, between the four of us as buyers, we represent quite a few $100 million of purchasing power right here.
That's 90% of it is Dubai.
90. That's right. I was throwing London into the mix too. So why don't we'll go to Andrew for this. Actually, I wanted to make one other quick point that sets up this question. I go to tons of smart city events all over the world, often to speak and do panels and things. And everybody talks about success all the time. Nobody wants to say the bad stuff. But we're between friends. Let's talk about some of the bad stuff. So the question really is, what urban innovation didn't work and why, and sort of kind of turn that into advice then. Right, does that make sense? What circumstances were not working to urban innovate?
And this question's to me.
Yeah.
Good, great. I said I was a cynical Brit, but it doesn't mean I want to talk about failure. I can do you hours on Brexit and those sorts of topics. Crikey, what has failed and why?
What approaches fail? Maybe more generally, perhaps.
Oh, okay. Well, I think procurement, lazy procurement of software is probably one of the worst crimes that city governments can commit. I've seen it time and time again, and I've seen city governments saddled with legacy systems that just serve no purpose over the longer term. There's a much more pleasant way of doing things, sort of open, civic technology where we are using open approaches, open code, we are repeating, we are borrowing, we are commissioning together. It's one of the last things I was trying to do in London, set up something called London Office of Technology and Innovation. Without giving you a deep history of the structures of London government, there are 33 municipal authorities that sat beneath the mayor's office where I worked. And we all do the same things. We've just got borders that separate us. We serve different communities of different colours and different stripes, of course, but the fundamental business that we do is exactly the same. And of course, we'd commission those pieces of antiquated software 33 times over for parking, for social care, you name it. And actually, if you can aggregate demand, if you can set out a clear set of requirements and you can buy once and share often, then that has to be a smarter way of doing things. And I think that's the best thing around urban innovation that a procurer of technology can do in this day and age. It is to make sure that you commission things once and you do so on the basis of open civic technology.
Yeah. And just real briefly, the advice to the seller, because that's good advice to us. We've got to get procurement better. What about these guys who are selling in?
Oh, again, it probably sounds a little bit hackneyed, so I apologize for that. But I think the sort of, the RFI approaches and RFPs is something that we do in Dubai probably a little bit better than London, where the procurement tends to be a bit stodgier. I think that's really important. Sandbox environments, playing a part in innovation labs. I mean, we heard this morning, people saying that, they don't get out of bed without some form of alignment of motivations, and I think public services should always try and do that. But get involved. It still might not be at the pace that a private sector organisation could move, but I think government is getting better. Because we've got those tensions, that's why it doesn't move as fast as the private sector does all the time.
Right, thank you. Thank you for that. So, by the way, John, I never knew that you were the Deputy CIO of San Jose, and I thought I knew your background. There are quite a few CIO positions there I didn't know about. So I think you have a lot to say in this topic. What advice would you give to entrepreneurs and innovators to be more successful in getting their innovation into government?
Oh, I thought you were saying I had a lot to say about failures. And I saw Tony smiling at me. He's wondering which failure story I was going to tell. Yeah, advice I would give. I think that's. I mean, I gave an example of why something failed, but I think that is an illustration. When there's a lack of alignment between what the goals of the government are, or the needs of the public, or the financial drivers of the company, that can cause failures a lot of time. I think a lot of times cool tech comes out, and tech companies, I get it. I used to work for one. I worked for Unisys for a while, so maybe you didn't know that about me.
I think I knew that.
Oh, you knew that one, okay. But I wasn't very good at it. I wasn't good at selling things. I wasn't really motivated by the whole financial sales number bonus thing, right? So I wasn't a good private sector employee. But likewise, I understand that side of it. But I would say, I get it. Most corporations, most companies are motivated by the need to make a profit and pay their bills and grow. That's not the motivation of government. Sometimes those two things get out of line. I would also say that, over-promising becomes a real problem. You can have failure in government, but credibility is the only thing you have in government. So sometimes when a CIO and private company work together, the CIO you're working with or IT people you're working with government, really their credibility is on the line. And so that can cause problems if something's overpromised and undelivered. It's not failure so much as a lack of expectations being reached, and that has a long-term effect. And people tend to shy away. I would also say some of these big ideas, again, and I'm going to pick on the smart cities idea, I think they're self-defining and self-limiting. So I've been part of the open data movement for a long time, right? So you can argue where that started. But in San Francisco was, I would say, one of the early leaders, pushers for open data. But I think we made some mistakes in the early days of open data, and we defined it as a city initiative. And so everybody has an open data initiative. New York's got one, Boston's got one, San Francisco's got one, LA's got one. The problem with that whole thing is that we haven't solved. I mean, it was a big deal, and we created positions around it and put a lot of money into it. And it was cool for doing like Next Bus in San Francisco when I was up there. But what you couldn't do is download the Next Bus app on your phone in San Francisco, get on a plane, fly to LAX, get off the plane, and have that app work in LA, because their open data model was completely different. And so I think because we didn't think a big enough scale from day one, it created this sort of bubble silo effect on some of these really cool, innovative ideas, but then sort of expanded to the point where they could and then stalled. And I think that's a real disservice to what we're trying to solve, where you can't have things work at sort of these invisible political boundaries. Like in my county, I always use El Camino. If you drive from San Francisco down to Palo Alto down here, you go through like 10 cities. Well, what if you have to download 10 apps just to every time you go through a city, oh, now that app's going to stop working. Now I got to go to this other app to see what traffic is. That's not going to work. Somebody gave the example of Audi and the cars, right, at stoplights. Every city has their own traffic control system. So you'd have to interface, with 16 different traffic control systems, and everybody's got a different data standard, right? That's really hard. And I think that's what government really needs to take on for some of these things to work at scale in regions or globally or nationally, is we've got to get out of this mindset that I only get paid for by this one entity, so I'm going to come up with solutions that work for my little space, and then I'm done. I think we've got to define our role and vision bigger than that.
Yeah, I'll jump on and bring it full circle back to the idea of smart cities. And I opened it with what I thought was a provocative statement to say smart cities are stupid. And it means that exactly what John said here about like a vision that becomes self-limiting. You're trying to achieve this vision, and if I don't do it, I guess I'm not a smart city. The thing is, at a practical level, cities have very real, persistent, thorny problems: homelessness, crime, climate change, inequality. I mean, real issues. And so when you come, now there comes the advice part. When you come and you talk to a city and you're pitching them, they're probably not going to want to hear about some overlay of my entire city, and I'm going to have a unified platform for my entire city, and everything is just going to be connected and work, and oh my gosh, this is a smart city vision, isn't it? That's fantasy. That's make-believe. Do something specific and do it well. Do it really good. Build something that solves a specific problem and does it really, really good, way better than what we're using right now, and come sell us that and say, all we want to do is help you solve this. That's how you move into it, instead of like trying to solve everything. When you try to solve everything, you solve nothing. So that's my advice.
Can I try and clear half the room or offend half the room in one statement?
Go for it.
Great. It's just struck me in the last couple of minutes. I think one of the things that's interesting about cities is that, you know, we all fetishize apps and apps that the private sector can provide to us. And there's a classic example, and it's Uber. Brilliant, hugely customer-centric. They turn up, you know, once you press the screen on your phone, 2 minutes later they're there. Actually, there's data that proves that they increase congestion, that they reduce public transport usage. So I think that's a great example of how you actually, you know, something is in your city. London has got 40,000 Uber drivers. Paris has got real sort of issues now around, you know, the on-demand economy and delivery vehicles of one form or another all over the place. So it feels like we've got a bit of a clearing up job. You know, if you're saying that the smart city is a stupid city, then I think, you know, dumb apps and tidying those up might be something we'd wish to concentrate on if we're to be smarter.
Mm-hmm. Nice point. So let's do a quick round, I suppose, of a few things here. We'll go to John, you on this. What is missing in the innovation community? What solutions would you like to see? Or if there's an area that needs more innovation, what would be the one you'd choose?
I would choose organizational structure. I think we still struggle in government to free up the resources and attention to work with the community and private sector to solve these problems. I think, you know, the easy answer in government was create a chief innovation officer position. And I mean, it was a step in the right direction. The problem is in government, not to bore you with government structure, but that position tended to be, it tended to be a lone wolf type of position reporting to a very high level person with no staff, no money, who loved to meet with startups and brainstorm cool things. But then at the end of the day, after POC, they're like, oh, let me go ask somebody who really has staff and money if we can do that. And then 90% of them wouldn't happen. So I think it was a great idea, but I think for government to be innovative and to start to solve, to work with you all in the public to solve problems long term, you've got to create a culture of innovation, and you've got to diffuse that passion and that idea of innovation throughout the organization and not ascribe it to a single person.
Great. Tony, you were saying do something and do it really, really well?
Yeah.
What is that?
Well, and it's whatever app or whatever service you're building. And I think of that in terms of, you know, I know everyone wants to chase the breakthrough innovation. We're just going to totally upend the way that we do transportation, and it's going to, you know, you're going to scale. Incremental innovation is okay too. Just make us do something a little better. Help us move a little farther along.
Do you have an area that you would love to see something happen in?
Yeah, something that, so what is the specific thing? It isn't any one thing. I think, I mean, I would echo John's comments about the organizational capacity for innovation, and that's something that we need to think about internally. But I think these models for open innovation, where, you know, you're the innovators that are developing new products, and then you find, you know, people inside government that want to adopt them and implement them, and we have to figure out how to implement them. So I think part of it is that partnership structure and maybe making it, there's a lot of great programs like STIR, Startup in Residence, where they foster this kind of partnership work. And I think those are helpful, but I also think maybe, alternative ways, I'll let you in on the secret of STIR, which is so brilliant, is it's a 12-week engagement with a startup, and there's no financial obligation from the city. So you transfer all the risk over. If the thing doesn't work, we don't sign a contract and we go our separate ways. If it does, we negotiate a contract after 12 weeks. That's smart because it allows us to be innovative without having to take that risk of putting money on the line and potentially having a big failure that now we have to explain. So thinking about things like that, structures, how we can partner together to maybe test things, figure them out, and then implement them is definitely going in the right direction.
Very nice, very nice. We're going to be wrapping up here in just a moment, but after this, we're going to have a 2-hour discussion on organizational strategy and government, I believe. Yeah, okay. I don't think so. Yeah. But I'm going to wrap it up because we're out of time and want to keep on track. Thank you very much, guys, and please give them a round of applause for their insights.
Well, thank you very much for the conversation, gentlemen. Let's put our hands together one more time for John, Andrew, Tani, and Jonathan. Well, we can continue our event today, thank you, with a wonderful presentation now about how new business models and new technology affects the existing law and regulation. And this presentation is going to be given by Robert Jensen. Robert Jensen is an accomplished senior executive and entrepreneurial advisor with more than 30 years of track record and success, all across different industries like technology, retail, health, biotech, education, energy, and so forth. So please, let's welcome Robert to give this presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank Plug and Play and especially Jennifer and Ingrid for being here and have this moment to share a little thought with you. So we've been hearing all day so far about the many ways that we need to be concerned. How do we do alignment? I like that word that was just mentioned here on the panel. And when we talk about public sector, everyone talks about the executive branch, and no one talks about the legislative branch. And this is what I want to share with you, is what are the challenges that we have now that we have new technologies disrupting new business models, new engagement models. So is the current regulatory environment aligned? Does anyone think it is? And what are the current legislative best practices that will actually help harmonize what is the new benefit that you get from the technology and at the same time safeguard all the rights of the other agents that are involved in the ecosystem? So everyone talked about Uber. But when Uber came out, look what happened in Rio. A whole bunch of taxi cabs complained and protested because they felt that they were actually holding the short end of the stick and no one came and talked to them. Now when Airbnb came in, well, they also complained about it because there was no legislative environment that could actually accommodate what was going on with the disruptive process. Of course, does anyone know who Joseph Schumpeter was? Wow. Austrian economist that came out with a very famous phrase of creative destruction. And that's what we're living through. We live that through cycles. We're always creating, and whatever creates, it will have to replace what was old. But, so now we have the e-scooters. Our friend from the Board of Supervisors from San Francisco, Ashe Safai, he mentioned that 10,000 e-scooters actually thrown into the streets of San Francisco. So what is the current legislative best practice that addresses the e-scooters inside the transit system? Of course, it's a great benefit. It's the last mile. We don't want it to go away, but at the same time, we have to safeguard all the other components of that transit system. Where is the current legislative? Actually, at the end of this presentation, I want to share with you, we have an ongoing study that's going around the world to see who is actually putting out the best legislation for accommodating e-scooters into their transit economy. So what are we going to do with autonomous vehicles? So what's going to happen then? So research and smart cities from the private sector. So they went out and interviewed U.S. mid-sized enterprise companies, over 500. And 90% of the CEOs said, listen, we do need better communication. We do need better legislative background. And yet, when you look at what was reintroduced by the federal legislative, a bill that was actually presented in 2017, and it had to be reintroduced now, it does not mention anything about the legislative branch. How does it play a role in safeguarding and creating really the smart cities for the future? You know, it was mentioned about open data policy. In our study, what we have found is that you can't consider any city to become a smart city if they don't have an open data policy, a sound open data policy. And yes, it should be integrated across the board and not just one single city. Can you imagine really downloading 10 apps going down from San Francisco to San Jose? I believe not. So with this in mind, and especially, you know, where I come from, I'm partially American, partially Brazilian. And I lived half of my life in Brazil. And in Brazil is still an emerging economy. And having been for a long time a third world country, it has very big urban challenges, much greater than here. And so how are we going to have, you know, the legislators from Brazil who are not technology savvy actually be the ones that are going to propose new regulatory environments to accommodate the disruption caused by the new technologies? So we need to help these legislators to have a reference, to have a sounding board, to have an index in which they can actually look who is actually applying the best legislation to accommodate this new technology, and what are the outcomes, what we can learn from that. So the Observatory of Smart Cities created by a federation of the largest trade technology association in Brazil called ACESPRO. iCities is a consultative arm that's connected to Barcelona with the Smart City Expo and Conference, Fira Barcelona. Our organization and Infinite Par, which is the investment arm. And what we're doing is we're actually creating a database of references of the best legislative practices worldwide. We want to be able to help legislators across the globe to have a reference and to help them fast track. They can't wait too long to come out with these legislations to help actually streamline and actually foster the new technologies, because at the end, like we said here today, this morning, everything is to make our lives better. So the legislative background has to be one more pillar to actually promote that. So who we are, we're just concerned business entities that want to make sure that what we come with smart cities as far as technologies are really providing the end result, the outcome we look for, which is better quality for the citizen. So we are going to create a smart legislative database which will help people consult and look at what's happening worldwide, and when they come and try to create their legislation in their own city, in their own county, in their region, they have a sound reference of where it's working best and why. So we have a specific focus, and the focus really is on creating areas in which you can actually be a reference. So smart government and open data. One thing that did happen, we have about a 5-team research people on board, and on their process of going out there and trying to bring in this primary data, what they have found is that first, very few people know what is a smart city. 2, very few people know why do we need to become a smart city. And 3, they didn't realize that nothing can begin if you don't have a sound open data policy in which you, not only policy, but then programs that you can help the environment, you can help society actually use that data to provide and build applications that will be beneficial for the citizen overall. It was mentioned earlier this morning about these verticals like smart grid and smart energy, IoT, smart mobility, and smart health. Well, in smart government, we are going to really, we will be launching an application, a mobile app, which will help every single citizen or organization to be able to contribute in providing insights and providing information regarding the best legislative practice for any specific technology that is currently disrupting the environment. So that will be out in the next couple of months, and that will create us exactly what we need to do, which is showcase a open data policy that actually is sound and adherent and consistent for many cities to apply. The smart grid energy is really being able to create a green environment. We're all living the greenhouse effect, the global warming. No one really can deny that what's going on. And we definitely need to be a lot more smarter in every single regulation that applies to the smart grid and applies to the energy policy. IoT, here is also a big security and safety issue that has to be addressed, because you're going to have millions and millions and millions of sensors collecting data, and who is actually looking at what are the regulations that make everyone compliant and will be adherent to the privacy and portability concerns about the data. Smart mobility, and we recently in Brazil have just, São Paulo, the city of São Paulo came out with a decree for e-scooters. Can anyone here think about being obligated to wear a helmet every single time? Right, so how do you offer the helmet? How the operators will offer a helmet? Also, they are creating different type of speed limits in which you, within a bike path, you can go up to 20 kilometers, but outside the bike path, you can only do 6 kilometers. Some cities don't even allow you to be outside the bike path. And in smart health, where there's a lot of, in the United States a long time back, HIPAA came out. I don't know how many people realize how HIPAA came about, but HIPAA was actually a regulation that was aimed at providing security for the employee who was going from work A to work B. And he wanted to actually be able to carry his same benefits that he had in work A to work B. And when someone heard that, wait a minute, you're going to move from here to there? So what about the privacy issues? What about the portability issues? What about the accountability issues? And that's what HIPAA is today. So the Observatory is actually established here in Silicon Valley. It was born with the Brazilian consulate and the entities I mentioned before. We do have already our first report. Our first report will be able to be downloaded. I'll show you the QR code. We came out with the first report actually to really educate. The education was what is a smart city? Why do I need to think about becoming a smart city, and where do I start? This first report actually aimed at showcasing the United States. United States is not the only region that's at the forefront, but it is one of them. So we covered 6 cities. We did cover San Francisco. I think our friend John Walton would be happy because we did cover San Mateo as well. And we covered Los Angeles. We covered, besides that, Vegas, DC, and New York. And now we're going to come out with a specific study on the e-scooters. There's been so much talk about the e-scooters, and they have been disruptive in every single way, and at the same time, they're a great benefit. Who has not ever tried an e-scooter before? See, only 3 or 4. So we've been using them. They're very practical. They do the job of doing the last mile. So our reports will be actually more what is green, what is yellow, what is red in the sense of every single functionality. And what we're looking at is looking at specific items that are now being covered when looking at what needs to be regulated or not in the usage of e-scooters. So we're covering these 9 functions, and in all of these 14 cities, this report will be ready in about 30 days. And again, it's aimed at providing current legislators across the globe and looking at what are the best practices, where is it working, where is it not, why is it working, why is it not. It's basically just a source so people can actually leverage from it and fast track their smart city strategies. This QR code here is a QR code where you can download the first report. So this recently in Brazil, we were privileged to actually hand the first report to our Minister of Science and Technology. I don't know how many people know about Brazil or follow Brazil, but that's our first astronaut as well. So our current Ministry of Science and Technology was the first Brazilian astronaut ever. So this is what I had to share with you guys. If you have any questions, these are my contact information, and I thank you very much for standing in.
Boop, boop. It works. Thank you, Robert, one more time. Let's give him a round of applause. Oh, I'll take this one. Thank you. Well, let's hop on an electric scooter and move on to the next segment, which is going to be exactly about that, about the revolution of micromobility. And the next speaker is going to be Colin Roche. What I like about him is the fact that his first invention actually came from an idea while he was in detention in high school, and it was an ergonomic pen. It was back in 2001, and he actually brought it to market, and he sold more than 10 million units worldwide, and that is exactly those are exactly the metrics that he's trying to hit now with his next project, SwiftMile. So without any further ado, let's welcome Colin from SwiftMile.
Okay. Okay, great. Well, it's fantastic to be back here. I've gotten to know Plug and Play very well over the last 2 or almost 3 years. They're definitely part of our journey, and I thought it'd be appropriate for this kind of talk is to kind of walk you through our journey and how we've kind of become this what we like to think is the gas station for the future for light electric vehicles. And our mantra is how we're going to power the micromobility revolution, which encompasses a lot like what the previous speaker mentioned, that's scooters and e-bikes and other things. Our whole core mission is really to power the micromobility revolution using the most sustainable means possible. And I think that kind of echoes well, certainly with cities of the future, with smart cities, smart mobility. But I'll first tell you how we first started. This was kind of one of these classic Silicon Valley startup stories. I had been working with one of my co-founders, Leo Vera, down in Santa Barbara, and they had this contest, this sort of raffle. If you entered in some money, donated some for a cause for Toys for Tots, you got entered into a raffle to win an electric bike. 300 people there. Who wins that bike? This guy. And I was right at a time where I've been an entrepreneur most of my life, for better or worse, as my wife might say. But by owning this thing now, this is in 2014, well before anybody was thinking about this stuff. And I'd use it all the time. It's very experiential. You'd use it, you'd go to Trader Joe's. Someone would say, what is that? What is that? Is that a motor? Is that a battery? How fast does it go? And the more and more I used this thing, the more and more it got me thinking about the future. And, you know, at the time, people were now using their apps to rent an Uber and a Lyft. And, you know, we're all aware that transportation is a major cause of global warming. And so kind of all these things started to fall into piece. Batteries are getting cheaper. The DC brushless hub motors are getting more efficient and inexpensive. So we went out there, and our first incarnation of this was to say, all right, what are these vehicles? What's out there? And if you could see here, this is kind of our first sort of image of all the different vehicles that we had. There was a scooter, there was a little trike, there was a skateboard, there was an electric bike. And what we're able to do is convince a lot of these manufacturers of these vehicles to essentially let us use them to go and approach all these Silicon Valley tech companies that are, you know, as you know, all around us. So we went out and really started to tell the world about what we want to do. And at this point, we were still a PowerPoint and a dream. We entered a contest with Verizon, which I thought would be very appropriate to show given that they're very strong in smart cities. And we're actually working with their smart cities group as we speak, deploying our stations connected to some of their smart city light poles that I'll talk about in a second. But we entered this contest. We're all excited. There's 1,500 companies from 78 countries, and we're one of the top 3 winners, which was a great boost for us. It gave us this validation from a Fortune 15 company that we're onto something big. But the $250,000 off the cap table was great too. So we went out and we started testing all these different vehicles. This was one of our first actual, we called this the Electric Roadshow, and we pitched to LinkedIn and Google and all these other companies that we're going to bring these great, what we called PETs, personal electric transports, a lot more sexy than saying LEVs. And they say, great, and we said, if we get people to buy them, that's good for us, but the idea here is to show how many different alternatives there are to a single occupancy vehicle, which is really the name of the day, especially back then. And so, as you can see right here, we were only expecting like 25, 50 people. That's what they said showed up. Within about an hour, we had done over like 500. People were coming out in droves. They were texting teammates saying, hey, there's these cool things in the parking lot. You got to come check them out. Nervous as hell, didn't have our commercial liability insurance yet. We were running around chasing people. Hey, wait, you're going the wrong way down the road. But it gave us another validation point. And as an entrepreneur, you're constantly asking yourself, am I on the right path? And we started to see, okay, really it's for us, it's not necessarily the vehicle. Those bets are going to be made, and that is something kind of a different business model than what we're thinking of. What we really wanted to be was we wanted to be this gas station, if you will. We wanted to be the powering system to power all these different vehicles because we knew the future is going to be electric. No one today is saying, hey, I've got this great idea for an internal combustion engine that I'm going to move people around in these cities of the future. That would never fly. And so our whole thesis was, okay, at the time, because we didn't have what we see today, and I'll lead up to that in a second, we didn't have them really everywhere. And so we built a turnkey system for an electric bike sharing system. And if we made it solar, it was great, because then that made the system 100% renewable powered transit. Pretty powerful, especially when cities are trying to hit their sustainability goals and we're trying to reduce carbon emissions. This was our first launch at the Silicon Valley Transit Authority. It was more of a manual system, but it really kicked open the door to get people thinking. City advocates, transportation planners, things like that. This was actually, I thought I'd throw this in here. We were at that same time, we joined the Plug and Play's mobility class of 2017, which was fantastic. Gave us tons of, expanded our network and really helped us kind of focus on some core parts of our business. We were fortunate to be the winner of their kind of pitch day, so that was kind of fun. But as we started to progress, we started to get good at this, and we started to launch our systems. This is at Tesla's headquarters here. This system is really designed to allow an employee to go home and back, eliminating the need for a car, and they rent the bike with the app, and it's got a long range, so they don't have to worry about charging it at home. And really started to grow from there. You can see we're at Google there, the Valley Transit Authority, Tesla, and also ChargePoint, which is a great opportunity for us for a business development cycle, our deal, because they charge big EVs and we charge small EVs. So we have a really expanded partnership with them that we're going to announce soon. But then the scooters came out. This happened in January of 2018. The world as we know it changed, certainly for mobility. That's when people woke up in Santa Monica and saw scooters on every corner, and people were riding them like mad and having a ton of fun, and people were going, oh my God, what just happened? And so we saw that and we went, okay, great. This is kind of the revolution that we're talking about. This is called disruption. This is called displacing cars. This is like when the horses and the buggies were starting to get interference with these cars that were driving around. And so we saw, obviously, that as a big opportunity. But more importantly, we started to see, well, what are the issues that are going to impede that from becoming mass adopted? And we're probably all aware of these, but to echo them, a big problem is they get left all over. They clutter the sidewalks. Cities today that we've met with, tons of people we've met with, and planning and organizers, that's one of the major issues. They get damaged just by taking them in and out to charge them. So you have people driving around, picking these scooters up, and then taking them home and then charging them, which kind of negates a lot of the effects of the goodness that the scooters bring. Less congestion. It's easier for people to get around. You decrease the car traffic in a given city. And then also the other part that we realized too with cities is they're looking for ways to kind of add some order to this chaos. This was just down in Venice Beach. This was 3 weeks ago. You can see when scooters, when there's too many of them or they don't have some system in place, it can kind of defeat part of the purpose. So what we came out with was the world's first scooter parking and charging system. It's not just for scooters. We're a micromobility platform. We can charge really any type vehicle, but today, obviously, scooters are the big one. The way our system works is we have our own onboard battery storage, and then our electronics and our smarts that are within the system. So when a scooter gets plugged in, we detect what kind of scooter is it, whose scooter is it, and then we can commence charging. Why that's important is there's many different vehicles that have a 36 volt, a 48 volt. Soon there's going to be a 58 volt vehicle out there. And as we started to talk with cities, the cities are going, yeah, we want a universal system. We don't want one that is specific to each of the different manufacturers or operators of the scooter systems. And so we really took that to heart. And all those learnings that we did early days with the bikes is really what allowed us to kind of launch this second product. It's called the Oasis, where scooters come in, they take a little nap, they get powered up, and then we collect that data, share it with the scooter operators, and we could share it with the cities. I already spoke about this a little bit, but universality is key. Specifically, like also when talking with these cities, is they want a common theme and a way that a consumer can recognize, okay, this is where I can pick a scooter up or a vehicle up or whatever it might be. It's a big part of it. But at the same hand, as the increase in usage of shared vehicles has taken off, that private ownership has taken off as well. So people, if you think about it, riding a scooter is kind of like a test ride for possible ownership of your own. So our system is also designed to accommodate the personal owned vehicles, which I think is a major factor for smart cities to account for, as the whole ecosystem for smart mobility. Here's some of our deployments. This is in Berlin. We were fortunate Berlin Transit Authority BVG. They recognize us as a leading player in this market, and they just launched scooters there within the last month or so. And so what they're doing is they're putting our stations outside of tram stops. They have over, I think, 800 tram stops where people get out, and they want to offer them scooters and bikes and other things as a true last mile solution. People come in from the outside of the city center, they get off at a tram stop, and they could grab one of these vehicles. And this one here is completely tied into the grid. And what's nice about our system is that the way we design it is we only charge our own batteries during off-peak hours. Cities really like that. It helps play well, nice with the grid. This is also, we're in some campuses, Deutsche Telekom, which is in Bonn, Germany. We're getting fantastic usage out of this. They've offered this as an employee perk. Their campus is spread out across about 5 miles, and now they have the complete system set up, and they've eliminated the need now for anybody to have to drive in these big vans and pick them up and then bring them back for the day. Deutsche Telekom is trying to be 100% sustainable in their business, and so that fit very well with what we're doing. We have a great partnership with Spin, which is owned by Ford, and fantastic partnership where we've really started to scale this in certain cities across the U.S. So we're in Tampa, we're in Ann Arbor, we're in Washington, D.C., and they're also offering very equitable locations of this to put in key areas that might normally get ignored during this kind of big revolution of new mobility options. Another thing that we've noticed with hotels is hotels are turning into this fantastic opportunity to be mobility hubs. If you think about it, most of you here, when you rented a hotel within the last month, you probably Uber or Lyft into that hotel. You probably didn't rent a car like you might have in the past. And so now you're at the hotel. Well, the only other way for you to get around is to get back into another car. And so the cities of the future, all that, we want to eliminate that best we can and give different options. Hotels like it because it offers a differentiated perk for the guests to use, and for us, it's a fantastic way to get power to power our own system, and for us to really kind of get this out and move the needle. In Portland, this is one of our first universal systems that got deployed. It's a single unit. It's outside of Portland's gas and electric. This is a great showcase for it, but this also leads us to kind of the big announcement that we have for another city that we're announcing here on the stage. Is we were just selected by Austin to be the very first universal charging system anywhere in the United States, and for that matter, anywhere in the world, for a public municipality to select an actual outside third-party vendor to be the charging solution for all these scooters. We like to say, one system to rule them all, or to charge them all. So we're very excited. They have 15,000 scooters in that town, which isn't the largest of towns, and they're going to increase that. So we're expecting to have a really great showcase there, especially come time by Southwest. Sorry, that's the screen I was supposed to show it. But either way, very exciting there because I think it's going to be a great showcase for, okay, here's a city that's really thinking forward about all these different transportation solutions, recognize some of the problems, and is now working towards kind of fixing that. Because it's all fixable. Like, these issues that we have are fixable. Before, when they're only in 10 cities, people didn't, really have an issue. But now that they're in hundreds, if not thousands, people are now talking about certain things that can be fixed. And we like to think we're part of that solution. The last part, one of the last pieces, is obviously we have to have a software layer on this that's reporting all of our data. So this is kind of hard to see, but we're reporting all the different charge levels of the scooters, how many times we've charged a scooter, the different locations. With cities, we can share with them, where did this power come from? Is it solar powered? So we can help them show this is how many of these different mobility options got powered off of solar. And then also with the scooter companies, they can now tap into our portal to see what different scooters that are charging. And also for us, it allows us to basically charge them kind of like a gas station. So they plug in and we charge them by the minute for charging. So it's kind of an efficient system, again, kind of modeled after the gas station. The last piece I'm going to leave you with is this. Not just to show my ugly mug on camera, but we've had a lot of press, and specifically because this is a very polarizing conversation. If you go and ask in any city where there's a lot of scooters deployed, ask a taxi driver, ask anybody. Some people, they'll say, I hate them. You go and ask another group, they say, I absolutely love them. And part of that is because of it's so new. It is, like I mentioned, it is a true disruption of mobility. A quick story, I was down in LA at one of the largest cities in LA County, and we were there meeting with the transportation planners. And they said, Colin, I'm so excited that you've come in. You're the first company that's here to actually try and address some of these problems we have, because we really like them, but man, we need some help. We're getting hammered by all kinds of citizens and all this. So okay, it's a great way to start a presentation. So I'm getting ready to kind of do my thing, and I asked, well, what do you call these things? Because a lot of the different counties call them something different: devices, light electric vehicles, scooters. And she raised her hand and she said, Colin, we call these trouble. I went, oh, okay. So tell me why. And it was all of these things, and every single thing she mentioned was fixable. That's exciting. So now you're talking about something here so disruptive, so exciting. Every single kid today that we all have that has a scooter in their garage, and most people here probably grew up riding one as well. So these things aren't going away. Maybe it'll change to a 3-wheeler or a 4-wheeler, whatever the case is, but we need to get these things because you know what it does? It totally disrupts the car, and it totally disrupts driving, and it 100% helps with our smart cities and getting rid of more emissions and global warming and making people move around in a much more effective way. So hope you join the revolution. Thank you very much, Plug and Play, for having me back. It's a real honor. And continue on.
Well, thank you so much, Colin, for sharing your stories, and congratulations on all the success you guys have been getting, especially the Austin one. So one more time, let's put our hands together for Colin and Swift Mile. Well, now that cities are becoming smarter and more connected, it's also very important to think about security, and physical security included. Our next speaker, William, is the CEO and chairman of a company called Knightscope, which is a developer of physical security robotic technologies. So please welcome, with a very warm round of applause, William Santanelli from Knightscope.
Good afternoon, everyone. 6 years ago this month, Knightscope was actually accepted into Plug and Play. And let's see, December of 13, we unveiled the first prototype of what we decided that we're going to go build. And I'm going to share with you the story of how we've gotten there and what drives the company. But we've now achieved what we were actually setting to do 6 years ago. So the primary topic is securing our country. You may not know this, but crime has a $1 trillion negative economic impact on the US every single year. It's a hidden tax we all pay in blood, tears, and treasure. A violent crime occurs every 25 seconds, a property crime every 4 seconds, and we're averaging 1 mass shooting per day. So here's the math that doesn't work. There are 2 million law enforcement and private security professionals trying to secure 300 million people across 50 states. That's just not probable or possible, and that's why we've got these miserable results. So when someone shoots up a synagogue or a movie theater or a school, tell me, who gets fired? No one, because no one's accountable, and that's a problem. And I love my country. I was born in New York City. One of the reasons I'm doing this is someone hit my town on 9/11. I'm still really pissed off about it. So the rest of my life, I'm dedicating to better securing our country. But we have a structural flaw here where outside the US, in most cases, police, law enforcement is kind of at the national level. It's not the case here in the US. The US Department of Defense has a $700 billion budget. There's one person in charge, the Secretary of Defense. There's a huge military industrial complex to build you whatever submarine, jet fighter, or tank the soldier might need. And there's a Raytheon, a Boeing, a Lockheed Martin, or a General Dynamics to build you that widget. On the Homeland side, the US Department of Justice and the US Department of Homeland Security has no federal jurisdiction over 19,000 law enforcement agencies and 8,000 private security firms. There's literally no one in charge. There's no budget, there's no process, there's no risk capital, there's no innovation strategy, and that's why in the year 2019, we have security guards sitting in a parking lot at 3 o'clock in the morning with a number 2 pencil and a notepad. We would never dare treat a soldier that way, but every day, 2 million people are willing to get up, take a bullet for you and your family, and the level of technology that we provide to them as a country is beneath the dignity of this nation. And so we have to fix this. So our slightly ambitious goal is to see if we can make the United States of America the safest country in the world. And now let the crazy founder just have a minute of suspended reality. If we were able to actually do that, talk to me about the impact on insurance rates, municipalities' budgets, infrastructure, the viability of someone's local business, the value of your local home, the safety of your family. Like literally, we'd be able to change everything for everyone. And so this is a solution that we've been working on for the last 6 years. It's a combination of hardware, software, and humans. So the first thing to do is what? Physical deterrence. This is very simple. If I put a marked law enforcement vehicle in front of your home or your office, criminal behavior changes. Most of these criminals aren't all that bright. They're looking for the path of least resistance to just get away with something. You pull into a hospital parking lot at 4 o'clock in the morning, there's a 5-foot-tall, 400-pound machine roaming around on its own, fully autonomous, no one guiding it. The strobe light's going, it says security on it. Like the likelihood you're gonna steal the car there is pretty low. You're probably gonna go down the street and steal the car. And that's literally what's been happening with our clients. We hold contracts in 15 states across 4 time zones, and I believe we're the only company in the world operating fully autonomous, no human intervention across an entire nation with actual clients generating real revenue. The second part of the strategy is to generate as much data from the environment as possible. So these machines, either stationary one, indoor, outdoor, or multi-terrain, generate over 90 terabytes of data that no human's gonna ever be able possibly to digest. So we turn that into a browser-based user interface that the third part of the equation is the humans. So I didn't get the memo. The robots aren't coming to kill you and take all your jobs. They're actually here, and they're here to help. And the idea is to put that detection capability in the hands of a security guard or law enforcement officer so they're able to do a lot more than they could ever possibly do, cover a lot more ground. So for example, some of the machines have facial recognition on them. Some can detect a mobile device in an area and treat it as if it was a license plate. We can read 1,200 license plates a minute. And if you're able to do all that and be able to provide that data to a law enforcement professional way in advance of an incident, that could be really helpful. So what would be an interesting use case? Let's say you're a Fortune 1000 company. 10 of them are actually clients of ours. You just fired someone and you're worried they're gonna come back. Or you're the principal of a school and you're worried that the kid you just expelled last week may come back. So you blacklist the license plate, you blacklist their mobile device and devices, and you blacklist their face. Now literally the machines are on the lookout for that particular detection. And that's been really helpful and effective. This is not theory. This is actually working out in the field. We offer our technology and a machine as a service business model at an effective price of $6 to $12 per hour, depending on the machine. And we sign annual contracts running 24/7. So our clients are, think of large corporate campuses like a Samsung or a Citizens Bank, malls like Westfield, hospitals like Dignity Health. And where we've seen a lot of positive impact thus far, we've already helped a law enforcement agency issue an arrest warrant for a sexual predator. We helped another law enforcement agency apprehend an armed gunman. We helped stop a fraudulent insurance claim. We helped a security guard apprehend a thief, and the list goes on and on. So we've had about over a dozen crime-fighting wins, and we're just getting started. So it's early days, but we've proven that the technology is actually capable, and we've got not only clients, but renewing clients. So the first city in the world to employ a fully autonomous security robot is the city of Hayward. So we've been pretty excited about having our first municipality as a client. Our second one, the city of Huntington Park. Not only the second city, but this is the first police department that has the words police literally emblazoned on the machine. And let's see, that's 2 cities, 19,000 more to go. And the second police department, North Texas College, is now up and patrolling. So that gives you a little bit of flavor of what we've been doing. I think we've got a video coming up just to give you a quick 30 seconds of these guys moving around.
The future is here, and Nightscope will help you secure it. Self-driving technology, robotics, and artificial intelligence are no longer science fiction. Our fully autonomous security robots are already operating across 15 states in 4 time zones, operating 24/7, helping humans better secure the places you work and visit. We are pioneers defining the future of security. Invest in Nightscope. Invest in the future of security. Learn about investing or schedule a free demo at www.nightscope.com.
So we've raised $40 million to date. We're raising our $50 million Reg A Plus IPO. We've reserved our ticker symbol on NASDAQ. It's going to be KSCP. If you're interested in learning more, just go to nightscope.com. But smart cities should use autonomous security. And that's our pitch.
Thank you, William, for sharing your vision. The future truly looks very, very safe. Now, let's continue with some more exciting technologies that are changing our lives and the world around us. Next up, we have a company called Atopia, which is a company enabling other companies to realize the potential of connected and autonomous vehicles. So with no further ado, let's welcome Alan.
Hi, everybody. How's it going? I'm Alan. I head business development for Atopia. We're a teleoperation company, as Giannis was saying, and we essentially develop the technology for safe remote control of any kind of vehicle. And up until today, we've been focusing and partnering with autonomous vehicle companies. How exactly, I'll get to in a second. But why are we presenting in a smart city forum? Well, because shared autonomous and electric mobility can make cities smarter. It can move more people, more goods, sustainably, efficiently, affordably, more conveniently. And some of these examples are obviously delivery robots, autonomous taxis, autonomous shuttles and buses, and even autonomous trams and trains. But what's the problem with autonomy? It's really, really hard to automate 100% of vehicle miles traveled. And in fact, some of the market leaders are recognizing that they underestimated the challenge, and what is exactly making it so hard? Edge cases, so unpredictable scenarios that will confuse, trip up the artificial intelligence in vehicles, but that could probably be very easily solved by you or me if we were driving in the vehicle. Some examples are bad weather, it could be road construction, it could be an accident where there's emergency response, and transit officers guiding traffic with hand gestures. So what's the best way of partnering with autonomous mobility companies to help them solve this? To provide human intelligence, but remotely, on demand, and safely. So what teleoperation consists of in the world of autonomy is essentially to allow the vehicle to call for help to a remote operator, a remote driver, and share in real time sensor data, video, audio, LiDAR and radar if needed, odometry, to a remote driver. And then the remote driver can help the vehicle navigate away from that kind of confusing situation and resume its trip autonomously. So this is a short video showing how it looks in action. Both the remote operator as well as the car. So as you can see, you need really low latency, really high reliability video to make sure that the remote driver knows what's happening and can provide assistance. And if you have a smart vehicle, you can also enable the vehicle to ask a question, the remote operator to answer it, so that you're not depending on real-time steering, real-time braking and accelerating. And there are added safety layers that we've developed that are proprietary, like level 1, level 2 automation, collision avoidance, but tailored for a remote driver or remote operator. And there are many different use cases for this. Some I already covered, like delivery robots and autonomous taxis, but there are many more. Another use case could be autonomous police robots. So teleoperation is actually a regulatory requirement in many leading geographies for any unmanned vehicle on public roads. So Japan, the UK, Canada, some other countries in Europe, and a lot of the autonomous vehicle test beds in the US have already mandated or somehow codified this into autonomous vehicle regulations. As I was saying, it's not just necessarily for autonomous fleets. We're in conversations with companies in logistics hubs, container terminals, but you could also think of, for construction, street cleaning, landscaping, and several repetitive and or hazardous tasks. Teleoperation has the potential to reduce injuries and to increase productivity. So what exactly do you need to solve to achieve safe teleoperation? One, you need a really reliable connection between the vehicle and the remote driver. So we've developed network bonding, which, whether it's 4G LTE or 5G or a combination of 4G and Wi-Fi, you have a much, much higher reliability of the connection than without our solution. You need real-time video, super low latency video. So we do our own video compression, and we integrate that with our network bonding solution to achieve essentially best-in-class latency for all the video streams that you were seeing, for instance, in the video, the marketing video. We do our own cybersecurity. We understand our platform better than anybody else, so we can defend against it more effectively. And some of the examples that you're seeing in the video are added layers of safety, collision warnings, collision avoidance, but also indirect methods of control, or allowing an autonomous vehicle, a delivery robot, an autonomous shuttle to ask a question and allow a remote operator to answer it remotely. So in order to conduct pilots or do aftermarket solutions for fleet operators, we have essentially teleoperation in a box. It's a hardware and software module for retrofitting vehicles. We are working with several companies today with the help of this solution. And I mean, what are some implications for smart city players? I think one is to really think of connectivity as a key enabler for automation in any context in the cities, in cities and in other environments. We believe it's going to be a must-have, and I think all of our customers agree it's going to be a must-have for commercializing, deploying autonomy, at least for the next 15, 20 years. Think of regulation, obviously put safety first, but also think of the upside from automation and autonomy in several contexts, whether it's security, whether it's affordability and equity of transports, and also think of collaboration in education, so building an ecosystem where large, small companies, all kinds of stakeholders can come in, collaborate, innovate. So if you have any questions or any interest feel free to reach out. I'm going to be around here after the pitch is over, after the event's over. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Alan. Next up, I would like to welcome Dr. Matt Ginsberg, who is the CEO, chairman, and co-founder of Connected Signals. He also happens to be the author of almost 100 academic publications in the space of AI. So I would say we can trust these guys. So I will let Matt tell you more about what they are up to at Connected Signals. Please welcome him with applause.
Thank you. Forget about the papers. I actually wrote a thriller you can get on Amazon called Factor Man. It's way more entertaining than any of the papers. I knew they were going to do this to me. They put me at the end of a day. You've been to a zillion presentations. You're exhausted. I actually don't even know who's in the audience at this point. So I figured I would try and make a talk that basically had no words. And I couldn't completely do that, but I came close. And I just want to answer sort of 4 questions. The first is what it is that we do, why it is that we do it. I'm going to get rid of these words in a minute. How it is that we get that done. And lastly, my question, which is who you all are. So what problem is it that we're trying to solve? Why? Well, the answer is actually pretty simple. We're trying to make some money. It turns out that Connected Signals is also, we've got a fairly significant environmental component to what we do, which I love telling my kids who don't respect me if I say I go to work to make money. As far as how, I can't tell you all the nuts and bolts about how the technology works, but I'll try and give you a pretty good feel for what it is that we get done. And lastly, by who, I really do mean who are you, what message do I want to get across to you, depending upon which of the various potential audience members you actually are. But let me start with the what. We live in this amazingly connected world. Your car talks to satellites to tell you how to get to your grandmother's house. Your phone talks to your thermostat. Google knows more about me than my wife does. Everything is connected to everything else except for traffic lights. We started this project thinking it would be easy, but it turns out the traffic lights are actually connected to nothing. This is bad. They're not connected to bicyclists. You know this because you see bicyclists get off their bikes and lie them down, trying to trigger the friggin' loop sensor and get it to recognize that they're trying to go through the light. Traffic lights aren't connected to pedestrians except by these buttons that you can push, and sometimes the buttons don't actually do anything, but they put them there to make the pedestrians feel better. Traffic lights aren't really connected to ambulances. They're not really connected to buses in meaningful ways, and surprisingly enough, they're not connected to cars. Each of us goes through thousands of traffic lights a year. We spend 60 hours each on average waiting for red lights, and the traffic lights are there oblivious to all of it. That's the problem we're trying to solve. We want to connect traffic lights to all these things and make the entire transportation sector, on land transportation sector, run a bit more efficiently. As far as why, let me give you a couple of examples of applications that we've actually fielded. These are things that are out there. They're certainly not the only things we can do, but this is just a couple of examples. So we have an app that you can download on your phone. It's called Enlighten, and it just gives you a speedometer. You're driving around, looks like a speedometer, except it has these green arcs. The green arcs mean sort of what you would expect them to mean. You go at the speed, you keep the needle in the green arc, the next light will be green when you get there. The second arc is sort of like Tetris. It's not the light you're approaching, it's the light after that. So this particular guy going his 27 miles an hour is actually going to make the next 2 lights, which probably on a well-timed street means he's going to make all the lights. And our goal here is to do things like, if you're driving along, I won't impugn you. If I'm driving along and I see a green light 100 yards in front of me, I go faster. I admit it. It's wrong. I do it anyway. I waste gas accelerating and decelerating. I stress myself out because I'm already thinking what I'm going to tell the cop who pulls me over. And I'm less safer because I'm speeding. We know, because Argonne National Laboratory tested it, that if you give people these green arcs, they stop doing that. Tell them they're going to make the light, and they don't want, I don't want to speed. I want the red light less. So tell them they're going to make the light, and they go through it smoothly and safely. This is already out there. It works at about 12,000 lights in the United States, 18,000 lights worldwide. You can download it, it's free, and so forth and so on. Here's another example. I'm sorry, the TAM here is about $1 billion a year. And if every car on the planet knew what every traffic light on the planet was doing, human carbon production would fall by about 1.3% of the total. It's an enormous number. Here's another example. We have an app that's live in Arcadia. It's like Google Maps. You're walking, and you put in your destination, and it gives you a route, and off you go. And as you do it, it pushes the traffic light buttons for you. And it pushes them from half a block away. So when you actually get to the intersection and you want to cross, the light's probably already green for you. The idea is to make walking more attractive. As walking becomes more attractive, more people walk, fewer people are in their cars. This particular picture is something we're going to deploy in Ohio reasonably soon. Same app, but it's for school kids walking to school. They don't even have to say where they're going. We know where they're going. They're walking to school. But the thing here is that because we know where they're going, we can provide the same functionality. We can push the buttons for them. They'll encounter fewer red lights. Walking to school will be safer. The TAM here is about $1.7 billion a year. The customer here is municipalities. And our goal here is simply to save the lives of people who are trying to cross the streets. In both cases, there are lots of other similar examples, either of the lights talking to cars, or people or vehicles, what have you, talking back to the lights. These are just two that I picked to show you today. How we do it, there are a couple of things I want to tell you, both of which we're very excited about. One is we have this little hardware device called V2IF, stands for Vehicle to Infrastructure for Free. We give them away at trade shows. Any city who wants one gets one. One of these devices will allow a city to connect all their traffic lights to the internet. Each device can handle about 2,500 signalized intersections. It's a patented device. It's the way that we get most of our city data about what lights are doing, and it's the way that we talk back to the traffic lights and suggest that they hold their green a little more because some pedestrian is crossing the street. The second thing that we do, in order to make these things work, we have to get live traffic light data, which means we have to figure out a way to convince cities to give it to us. We've done that at about 12,000 lights in North America, but more recently, we figured out a way to turn vehicular probe data, floating car data, it's the data you give Google when you drive around using Google Maps. We've actually figured out a way to turn historical floating car data to live traffic light data. So we're going to be able to release our services essentially at every light in the United States, and that's coming around the end of the year. And then things like Enlighten will simply work everywhere. You'll drive around and tell you how fast to go if you want to hit the next light green. Lastly, as far as who you are, that depends. And I actually want to say different things depending upon which of the various groups you might be. If you're an automaker, I hope that you will find me after this presentation and talk to me about working with you. We're probably already talking to your organization. We've spoken with pretty much every automaker that there is. We've done proof of concept demos for about half of them. Your company may or may not be in that half. If it isn't, we'd like to switch that. So please come and talk to me about the kind of stuff we're doing and about getting our signal data into your cars. Not just, somebody mentioned Audi, which is a very limited program. We can do this universally across the country, and we'd love to help you do that. If you're a city, we'd love to talk to you about the signal priority system that I've described, where various things can talk back to traffic lights and make them behave more efficiently. Again, in Arcadia, we have a program that their buses tell us where they are, and we then talk to the traffic lights and say, a bus is coming, hold the green for just a minute and let the bus go through. There's very little impact on the cross traffic, but Arcadia found out that by deploying this system, they were able to cut the time that their buses spent waiting at red lights by a factor of 2. So their buses became substantially more efficient. And lastly, if you're an investor, we're in the middle of a round. Everybody seems to be in the middle of a round. We're raising $12 million. About 2.5 of that is left. If you're interested in participating, that would be great. We're expecting the round to close around the end of the month. But again, if that's something that's attractive to you, please let me know, and I'd love to discuss it. So that's basically all I have to say. I do have a few words. We think this is absolutely essential technology. We think that In tomorrow's world, traffic lights are going to be as connected as everything else. The benefits are too great, and the cost with the kind of technology we bring to bear is just too small. It's something that has to get done. We're unique in that we can provide global coverage here. We can tell you what every light in the country is doing. We're very excited to be able to release that, and we'll be extending it outside of the United States to everywhere else reasonably soon. Our goal is to completely own this space. It's got about a $2.7 billion a year market, and it's going to be our space. And lastly, if you're interested, we've got about $2.5 million left in a $12 million raise. That's it. Thank you for paying attention. Good luck with the rest of the talks today, and I'll be around if anybody wants to talk.
Thank you, Matt. Hopefully, we will get to see you afterwards during the networking portion of the day. So stick around, please. Now, I would like to welcome on stage Anurag from Zensors. Zensors is a platform that is using cameras to provide real-time insights about critical business or operational processes. To tell you more about this, please give him a warm round of applause.
Good afternoon, everyone. So we've all been talking about IoT and IoT being adopted and used, and there's been a promise of it doing a lot for us in the last several years. But the fact still remains that adopting IoT is expensive, it's complicated, it's difficult to install. You don't know where to really make use of this. And so most give up at some point. They realize that the promise has been really big, but what you see on the ground sort of does not match up with that promise. In looking at this, one of the things we realized is, cameras are everywhere. Cameras have become ubiquitous. We see them in stores, we see them on intersections, they're on streets, they're on highways. And so at Zensors, we thought about, how can we do IoT without all of the expenses of hardware that's needed? Can we do software-defined sensing? So can we take these cameras and convert them into sensors that behave like IoT devices? And to do that, we built out a platform that essentially allows you to go from any particular camera to a custom sensor in 60 seconds. You attach the camera to our platform, you ask a question. Today we support questions of the format yes, no, or how many. And from that, we'll produce data to answer that question. And so we have a system that's able to run on that video, understand your question, use natural language processing, and calibrate to that particular scene and situation to produce a really, really high accuracy sensor, much like you would have if you had gone and put a motion-based or a light-based or any other type of hardware signal processing sensor. So you can imagine what that does now for cities and city intersections. With a single camera at a city intersection, I can answer hundreds of different things. I can know if the trash was taken out. I can know how many people used the trash can. I can know how many people waited for the bus, how long they waited for the bus. I can know if the construction crew was in violation of any of the permits that they've been issued. All of this, again, without installing any new hardware on this intersection. And so what we've started doing is taking data from all of these cameras, processing them into our platform, and then allowing cities to make real-time decisions around all of these processes. So whether it's parking, whether it's waste management, whether it's traffic optimization, or around scheduling other city events and special policies. And then the platform goes beyond just outdoor cameras. We take these into large public spaces that also belong to cities and municipalities. So think of an airport. An airport is a mini city in itself. You have shopping, you have people traveling for all kinds of things. You have a whole host of services. Again, all separate and sort of not talking to each other or not organized. You interact with each different service individually, much like you do at the city. It also turns out airport is the most camera-dense public space for safety reasons of any other public space out there. So to be able to capture this information and deliver it, and this is where it gets interesting, because what we've done is we've taken these sensors and said, hey, having actionable data is great, but let's also create experiences. Let's create real-time experiences. So at one of our airports, we're able to track the line at check-in, at the curb, at the gate, in TSA, and we're able to push that information on wait time to every customer via mobile device, these large displays at the airport, or even on their website. And so you can imagine, as someone going through the airport, I can know exactly how long it's going to take me from the curb to the gate to make my flight. I can know when to leave my house, and I can know, what to expect far before I even reach the airport. So I think that's where, the data goes beyond just having sensors and machine learning. Part of our team comes from this background in human-computer interaction, thinking about how we interact with all of these sensors and pieces of information. And yes, having actionable, digestible data is really interesting. But when you take all of this data and use it in real time to drive experiences, that's where the magic of our platform is really coming in, where whether it's the airport and wait time at the airport, or whether it's at traffic at an intersection, or even a city who's looking to get trash notifications. So they ask us if there's trash bags put on the sidewalk, and they send someone to proactively clear it up. All of these situations are actually evolving how people are interacting with the environment around them in the city. And that's what's really exciting for us. It's giving all of these people who traditionally didn't have any understanding of AI or machine learning the ability to simply ask questions and start operating in a far more efficient manner using real-time data that was previously unlocked, or previously locked and is being unlocked by us today. And to do this, we have assembled together an amazing team. It's interesting, our team comes from, yes, an applied AI background, but as I mentioned, an interaction design and human science background as well. So we think a lot about, how to drive these experiences. What does it mean to have all of this information available, and how to create an experience for people who have no knowledge of any of these amazing new AI technologies or deep learning technologies, to actually create their own AI agents to monitor their workspace or to monitor their city and help them out in day-to-day operations. So with that, I'd like to conclude. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anurag. Next up, we will have Danny Kennedy, who is the CEO of New Energy Nexus, which is a company that is connecting entrepreneurs everywhere to build a clean energy economy that would benefit all of us. To talk more about that, to give you more insights and perspective from an investor's standpoint, as well as share some key takeaways after all the things we heard today, I would love you guys to put your hands together for Danny. Please, let's welcome him.
Thank you very much, and I realize I'm the last one between you and beer, so I will try to keep this brief. I actually want to ask all of you a question, which is, who here lives in a smart city? Really? Does anyone feel like they live in a smart city? Okay, that's actually not what I expected. I was expecting you all to say, oh, I'm in a smart city. All right, I'm going to ask you a different question, and I apologize. I feel like you're all sapped from a long day, but who can yell out the name of a city they consider to be smart? Come on. Singapore. Interesting. Columbus, Ohio. London, England. Vancouver, Canada. Okay. I mean, I was asked to come up here and do a bit of a takeaways, wrap up the day, investor feedback, cities at a crossroad as we started the day. And I got to say, I think one of my takeaways is there's not a lot of consensus amongst us about what even a smart city is. There's a lot of stuff being talked about, a lot of technology, goods and services being proposed. And as an investor, the first question I ask is, what problem are you solving? And I'm not sure we actually know that. I was reminded of a joke during the course of the day when I received a text message over my phone. Who got the text message from PG&E today? Did you? Who lives in the Bay Area or in San Mateo County? Is the guy from San Mateo still here? What about San Jose? Anyone live in San Jose? You realize that 800,000 people are at risk in the next 24 hours of being blacked out. We're in the middle of Silicon Valley. We're the best, smartest innovators in the world, right? Hey, huh? Best and brightest, right here, Silicon Valley. We make it all. We do all the value creation. We're adding everything. You're about to be blacked out. 5 days, they're saying. So the joke that I was reminded of, I'm unfortunately unable to get it up on the screen because I thought of it too late, is this old chestnut we used to run around the turn of the century, the last time blackouts were a big thing in California, which was a graphic of a text stream, dialogue on a WhatsApp or something or other, between Wikipedia, who said, I know everything, and Google said, I have all the data, and Facebook said, I have all your friends' contacts, and the internet said, I have it all, and electricity said, keep talking, bitches. The mother of all networks in this smart city gets shut down by the operators of it and is deemed to be acceptable. And yet we're sitting here talking about robots for security devices and other things, which I'm sure are all good in and of themselves. But again, I would ask you to come back to the messages that we heard from the policymakers and the regulators as cities. Oh, thank you. Someone came up with my joke. There it is. What problems are we solving? The city of San Francisco, sort of the capital these days of Silicon Valley, even though Silicon Valley was this field down here flooded with money by the Department of Defense in the 50s and 60s to create microchips, and we forget that actual heritage. But anyway, you're stepping over homeless people and criminal inequality. And we're solving for future issues that, bluntly, I'm not sure who's going to pay you for. As an investor, again, I would ask the question, what problem are you solving? Who's going to pay you, secondly? And then thirdly, does what they pay you cover the cost? And I heard a lot of things that I'm not sure where the cost coverage on unit economics happened, bluntly. We've got to get smart about our smart cities, technologies, goods, and services if we're going to build smarter cities. And first of all, I would encourage us all to serve needs as the folk from San Mateo, San Leandro, the former CIO of Palo Alto were saying. Don't come to a city with an overlay technology that needs them to bend to your will. Solve one of the problems they have. Not an app that creates congestion, but an app that solves congestion and that someone will pay for and that will cover your cost. That's sort of my takeaway in a big picture and the irony of the day in which we're in a town that's about to go down on the biggest network of all, and all the sensors and all the lights and all the interdependent connected systems will not be able to run if there ain't no juice in the network. And that's kind of the reality of California in 2020 going into it. So not to be too doomsayish, I think the takeaway I have is we need more of this. So I want to thank Plug and Play. I want to thank you for hosting a conversation about very important issues. I think cities are where humanity is moving. 300 million Indians will move into cities this decade. That's the population of the United States. 20 of the world's largest 30 cities are currently in Asia, and most of the next ones will be built in Asia. There are 50%, we talked about the middle class and the growth of demand centers for your products and services from a middle class that's booming. In America, that middle class is not actually growing that much. In fact, there's some evidence it's declining. The middle class is booming in Asia. That's where 50% of the world's middle class by income will be from next year. And so good services and products and technologies that meet their needs would be very wisely built and served as well. And I think more Smart Cities Innovations Days are what we need now. I thank you for all the great content, but I encourage us to challenge ourselves about what the world needs going into 2020, given the realities outside the door. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Danny. And I'm glad the last image actually worked that we wanted to include in your presentation. Now, what is happening is that I guess I have to tap dance a little because I'm waiting for the whole mastermind behind this whole event. Jennifer, you saw her earlier today. She is on her way from upstairs. She's still on her way. I don't see her in the doorway, so something. But no, honestly, thank you guys for being here. It's such an honor to host such an incredible group of people here today at Plug and Play. I hope this will not be the last time you stop by. We would be more than welcome to host you another time at another event later this year or next year, whatever your schedule permits. Now, I really would appreciate if you would not get up just yet, because basically I'm the only thing between yourselves and some fun activities out there, because we will have the networking portion of the day, which is going to be Oktoberfest themed. So there's going to be plenty of pretzels, there's going to be beer, and I hope there's going to be Jen too. But Jen is still not here. What else? Okay, actually, Jen is here, and on behalf of the entire team, I would love to thank Jen for putting all of this incredible events together, and this is a change in attire. You look wonderful. Any closing remarks from your side?
Thank you. Yeah, I quickly changed for the rest of the evening, because now the fun part starts, and I'd like to invite you to meet us outside on the patio for a wonderful Oktoberfest. I'm dressed up, so I await that every one of you is now getting into their dirndls and lederhosen. Yes? So have a wonderful evening. Thank you for being here today. If you want to connect with us about smart cities and our initiative, please feel free to always reach out to us. Thank you. Bye.